Hey folks, welcome to the second session of Flutter Festival. And today we are going to learn about how to build UI components in Flutter. We'll keep this session very short and simple. We won't be going too much into the depths of how we'll be building UI with Flutter. Today's session is going to be more focused on like what a basic Flutter code looks like and what are the basic things about a Flutter code, like the widgets and stuff like that. So without wasting any time, let's just dive right into the code. Let's just dive right into the hands-on workshop. So yeah, I won't be wasting any time on like how to set up your Flutter environment and stuff like that. Those resources are readily available on internet. I'll share them with you as well by the end of the session, so you can take a look at the documentation on how to set up your Flutter and how to start coding basically. We just dive right into the code part of it, and yeah, you can just follow along. There won't be a lot of coding today. We'll just take a look at like how things work in Flutter. It's going to be a very basic session, and you guys just have to follow along and it'll be good to go. Let me know once my screen is visible. Just a sec, I'll have to stop the screen share. Yeah, I hope the screen is visible. So I'll just dive right into the first part will be to create your Flutter project. All right. So for that, what you need to do is just press like in your VS Code window. I'll be using VS Code for this tutorial. You can use Android Studio as well. That is the more preferable options. But for systems with low RAM or the systems that don't have a lot of juice in them, uh, I personally suggest going with Visual Studio Code as it is a very lightweight option as compared to Android Studio, and you'll at least be able to run your code. This is for like laptops with 8 GB RAM. If you have 16 GB RAM or more in your PC, then you're good to use Android Studio. So for this session, I'll be using Visual Studio Code, and yeah, the first thing is you have to create your Flutter project, right? So for that, what you do is you open the Visual Studio Code command palette, and for that the command is Control plus Shift and then P. Now one thing, before this comes up, before this Flutter commands come up, the first thing that you'll need to do is install the Flutter extension inside VS Code. So for that, just go to Settings, go to Extensions. From here you can find Flutter. In my case, I've already installed it, but all you need to do is like open this Flutter extension and then you'll get a install button over here. Just install the Flutter extension and all the basic Flutter utilities and uh, like the interface in Flutter will be available to you. So yeah, that was the first part of it. You need to first of all install the Flutter extension inside your VS Code window. Cool. Then the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to start our like create a Flutter project. So again, we'll be opening the command palette, Control plus Shift plus P, which is a shortcut, and then just type Flutter over here. So now you can see there are three options. The first one is new project. This will be used for creating a project. But in case you want to check if your Flutter is installed properly or not, like all the dependencies, all the required SDKs and stuff like that are installed properly or not, just use this command, run Flutter Doctor. Press enter. Now the Flutter Doctor is going to run, and it will check all the dependencies and stuff are available or not. So this is going to take a few seconds. Yeah, as you can see, this ran properly and no issues were found. So this simply tells me that my Flutter installation is correct and I'm good to go and start working on a project. So again, I'll open command palette. I'll create a new project. Now there are a few options over here: application, module, package, plugin, skeleton. So in this case, we'll be needing an application since we are building a mobile application over here. So yeah, I'll start a Flutter application. Just select a folder where you want to create this application. I'll just go with this default one. I'll name the app Caffeine. Um, cool. So one thing that you need to make sure while naming your Flutter application or the project name is that first of all, it has to be in lowercase, completely in lowercase, and it has to be in snake case. So all lowercase, underscores, and then all lowercase, all lowercase. So this is how you define your Flutter project name in snake case. All right, so we have created this project. Now, as you can see, there was a script over here, flutter.create. So Flutter is going to run that script and all these files appear up. Now, what all files are these? Let's quickly go over these. So the first one is readme.md. So this basically is if you upload this project on GitHub, so you'll be needing a README, a documentation file, so that people can take a look at the documentation file and understand what all stuff is there inside your project. So the readme.md is for that. Pubspec YAML, we'll come to this later on. This is one of the most important components of your Flutter application. Let's just take a look at it right now itself. So the first part of it is the name of your Flutter project and then a short description. You can change this description easily. If you want to change the name, there will be a few more steps involving this. So for now, we won't be changing the name. Now, publish to is like if you want to publish this application somewhere. This is generally used for modules and packages. So no need to change this right now. And this is basically specifying your SDK environment. Then we have dependencies over here. So uh, one of the dependencies is Flutter. Then if you want to install some additional packages or like include some third party packages within your project, so those you can define over here. Then there are a few more settings, as you can see. If you want to include images within your project, or let's say sound files or videos or stuff like that, which are basically assets in when it comes to like front end designing and designing stuff. So if you want to include assets within your project, all you need to do is, I'll just give a quick example, just uncomment it, then define whatever like assets you have inside your project. Right now, we won't be using any assets, so I'll just comment it back. Now, if you want to use third-party fonts and stuff like that, for that as well, there's this font setting, and you can just uncomment it and add fonts as per your requirement. Now, one thing is, once you are done editing this pubspec.yaml file, you need to make sure that all the dependencies that you included within the file got installed, right? So what you need to do is open your terminal. It's taking some time, and you need to run the command flutter pub get. This is going to get all the dependencies within your Flutter project. Now, one interesting thing about both Android Studio and VS Code after you have installed the Flutter extension is that once you like it automatically runs this command, the flutter pubget command, so that once you're done editing the pubspec.yaml file, the flutter pubget command will automatically run in the background and all the dependencies will get installed automatically, so you don't have to bother much about it. But in case somehow it fails, you can fix the issue and run the command manually. This is the command flutter pubget. And once again, I'll repeat, flutter pubget is a command that you run after editing your pubspec.yaml file to make sure that all the external dependencies or the changes that you have made inside your pubspec.yaml file are installed. All right. The next thing is the pubspec.log file. So this is again, okay. So the pubspec.yaml file, that was just like keeping track of all the dependencies within your project. The pubspec.log file keeps track of the exact version and all like info regarding your external modules that you install within your Flutter project. Then there are a few more things here. The git ignore file. Git ignore, basically what you include inside git ignore is stuff that you don't want to go on your GitHub. Like let's say there's a secrets file. Secrets file, um, basically when you're using a lot of APIs and stuff like that, you want to maintain some client secrets or access codes or stuff like that. So that you put inside a secrets file, environment file, or there are many names for that. And those files you don't want to go on your public GitHub repositories. Otherwise, someone else will uh, be able to get those access codes and access your APIs on your behalf, which you don't want. So those files you put inside a env file, and just make sure that once you have put those secrets in an env file, you include that env file's name or location over here. Location, sorry. You include the location of the env file over here, so it doesn't go on your GitHub. Then there's web. So as we discussed yesterday, Flutter allows you to create applications for different platforms using the same code base. All right. So we have web here, then there's Android, and then there's iOS. So what's basically happening here is that whatever code that you're going to write in Flutter, that will be compiled to web, Android, and iOS versions. All right. And these folders, this web folder and then the iOS folder and Android folder, these contain some dependencies that are specific to these platforms. So if you go inside, let's say the Android folder, there's a Gradle folder, there's a Gradle file and stuff like that. These are Android specific stuff, things, Android specific files. So if you want to make some Android specific changes or setting changes, or include some particular dependencies that are specific to Android, or let's say iOS, or let's say web, then you have to make those changes inside these folders. We won't be covering these right now. This is something like you'll come across if you build more like production ready apps. So not required as of now. Um, Now the next thing is this test folder. There's widget test.dart. So this is the file where you write all your test cases. What are test cases? Test cases, the concept of testing comes into test driven development, where whatever code you're writing, you write some unit test cases for that as well, to make sure that uh, your application will behave properly, things won't break. uh, when you're writing test cases, basically what you're writing is you're writing pieces of code that will check that your application will run properly. And you include all the edge cases, like let's say the user will click repeatedly or stuff like that. I'm just giving an example. So you include all the edge cases and you make sure that your code performs well on all the edge cases. So that's what you use test for, and all your tests go inside this test folder. Um, yeah, so this was the basic overview of all the other stuff inside this folder. Now we come to the main part, that is the lib folder. The lib folder is where your actual Flutter code lies, and inside the lib folder we have the main dot file. All right. So this main.dart file is your entry point inside your Flutter application. So whatever code that you're going to write inside the lib folder, it doesn't matter. Flutter will directly find this main.dart file, and it will execute the code inside the main.dart file, which will eventually execute your entire application's code. So let's take a quick look at what all stuff is there already inside it. Let me just run this application as well. So I won't be using Android emulators for this session because this is a pretty lightweight session. I just want you guys to understand what all different things are there inside a Flutter code. We'll be using emulators and stuff for the future sessions where we'll be building the actual application. We'll be integrating Firebase and stuff. So those will be the more advanced sessions, and there's where we like actually code the application. Today's session is more of an introductory session on Flutter. All right. So meanwhile, by the time this code starts running, okay, it's all. I'll just put it to the side. I hope it's visible. Okay, so this is our demo Flutter application that comes with the default Flutter code. We'll understand, we'll take a look at this application later on. First of all, take a quick overview of this code. So first of all, we are importing the main material.dart package from Flutter. This is a built-in package. So Flutter, like just all the other programming paradigms and programming languages, frameworks within Android ecosystem, the Google ecosystem, it supports material design concepts. So this material.dart package, it consists of all the material widgets inside Flutter. Now you'll be coming across this term widget more frequently. What is a widget? You need not understand the definition of it very well, but basically, a widget is all the UI components that you see inside your application and all the components inside your application or the code that like build up the entire application piece by piece. So widgets are basically the pieces of individual components of your application that combine together to make the entire application. I hope you got a basic gist of what widgets are. Now, the first thing, the most important thing, we understood that this yesterday as well in yesterday's session where we had a basic hands-on session on Dart. So yesterday I said that in every Dart code there has to be a main function which will be the entry point of your application of your code. The main function is the function that actually gets executed, and from there your entire code gets executed. All right. So here as well we have a main function within our code within the main.dart file, and then we have a run app function. Run app function is basically going to take a material app and it is going to run that application. uh, what do I mean by run that application? It is going to create a widget tree. Now again, what is a widget tree? So you can think of it like this. uh, there's a hierarchy inside Flutter, like hierarchy of widgets inside Flutter. So let's say the first widget is going to be your like the material app. Then inside that we'll have more screens and stuff. So eventually, and then the screens will have their own widgets or their own components, and so this will keep going on, and then what we eventually get is a top down tree kind of structure. And this is how Flutter maintains its widgets. It maintains its data, its state, and everything. So Flutter has a Flutter tree, I mean a widget tree, and this run app function, it basically creates that widget tree. All right. Now the next thing that we see over here, okay, yesterday we discussed like object oriented programming concepts, creating class and stuff. So as you can see, the first thing that we came across was a class. Extends basically means it, like we discussed this yesterday as well. Extends is basically inheritance. So our my app uh, class, it extends stateless widget. We'll understand what stateless and stateful widgets are in a bit. But what this particular line of code says is that my app is a stateless widget. All right. Then inside that we are returning. Uh, uh, okay. So every widget, every stateful and stateless widget is going to have a build function. Build function is actually the function that builds your widget, and then it gets embedded to the widget tree. All right. So it is going to have a build function, and that this build function returns a widget of material type. this particular build function returns a widget of material app. And material app is basically your application. Now the material app is going to have screens as well. Like there's going to be a home, there's going to be a theme, a title, and a lot more other things. We'll come back to this later on. Now let's understand what stateless and stateful widgets are. So, uh, what is state first of all when it comes to Flutter or React or any other like front end framework? State is basically all the data that is required by your application to run that application. Now, there are two kinds of widgets: stateless widgets and stateful widgets. When it comes to stateless widgets, there is no state as such. There's no data that will be changing over time. Everything is static. So, stateless widgets don't need information or don't need to maintain information. Whatever is there, it's static. It won't be changing. On the other hand, when it comes to stateful widgets, the information might change. The data that the widgets are holding, they might change. So there's a need to maintain the state. There's a need to maintain that data. And when this data changes, in case of stateless widgets, the data isn't changing. So once we create a widget, it stays like that. It won't be changing. But when it comes to stateful widgets, the data can be changing. All right. And once the data starts changing, so you need to reflect those changes inside your Flutter applications, right? Let me give you a quick example of what I'm saying by the data is changing. So right now we have a 0 over here, right? Now if I click this button, this becomes 1. So the data changed, the information changed, that is required to, you know, build and show your application. So this data changed. So what's happening here is when you clicked on this button, this entire widget got rebuilt. It got built once again, so the latest data can be shown. All right. And the state is still being maintained. That is this number 2. So yeah, in case of stateless widgets, once the widgets get built, uh, an example of stateless widget will be this app bar over here. This is not changing. This is fixed. The data isn't changing over here. And so once this top app bar gets built, it won't be changing again. And therefore, it's a stateless widget. But this one, this is changing. And this data is changing. We need to maintain this data. So it's a stateful widget. And once the data changes inside a stateful widget, it gets rebuilt again and then it gets embedded again into the widget tree. So this was a quick overview of what stateful and stateless widgets are. Once you start working in a Flutter application, then you'll get a proper gist of what stateful and stateless widgets are. You'll be able to understand why do you need both of these more properly. Just give me a second. Hmm. All right, on to the next part. So like I said before, the first entry point inside your application, inside your Flutter code, is the main.dart file. Inside that main.dart file, we have a main function, which is your actual entry point inside the code. The run app function, it takes a widget. Like if you have VS Code, the easiest thing that you can do if you don't understand what you're doing is just hover over the functions or the like inbuilt things inside Flutter, and it will give you a proper documentation of what's going on. So you need to provide a widget to the run app function, and it is going to build the widget tree. And yeah, so here we are providing it a material app widget, a material app, and it's a stateless widget for now. There are a few properties associated with it. If you hover over it, there's going to be on unknown route and a lot of things. You can set theme. You can enable or disable dark theme if you want. Uh, yeah, a lot of properties. A lot of properties. I'll give you a quick example of one of the properties. You see this small banner or flag kind of thing over here, right? You can remove this if you want. So all you need to do to like remove this is you need to define like set a flag over here. So that flag goes by the name debug show checked mode banner, and you need to set it as false. I'll reload the application, and as you can see, that particular banner is gone. If I set it back to true and reload the application, the banner appears again. I hate this banner, so I'll just set it to false, and voila. Another thing that you can do, what if we want to change this color, this app bar color? So currently, what the primary swatch like this particular property tells us the primary color of your application is currently blue. Let's set it to teal. I personally prefer teal better, so yeah, there's that. You can change this to anything that you want. Um, since our application is caffeine, so we'll name it caffeine. This changed. I'll tell you why this, while just changing this particular thing, change this uh, title in the app bar. And you can change this as well, like the class name, instead of keeping it as my app, you can name it anything else. Like for example, let's keep it caffeine. Now obviously my app isn't defined anymore, so we'll need to change this as well. And since we have changed the class name, there's no my app inside our code as of now, so we'll change this as well. I hope this fixes everything. Yeah, this fix everything. There's one more thing. So inside this test widget test.dart, we still have a my app, and we don't have my app anywhere inside our code. So we'll set this as caffeine as well. And all the errors within our code have disappeared. Let's get back to the code. Uh, yeah, so we have discussed the material app widget so far. Now the next thing is, all right. So the next thing is this material app widget is going to take a home widget. This home widget is going to be the first page that is going to open when you run your application, which is basically your home page. All right. So this home page again, it is a widget. Everything inside Flutter is a widget, whether it's the text that you're putting in, or whether some image that you're putting in, or any component inside your Flutter code is a Flutter widget. Now, an interesting thing, we discussed this late earlier as well. Your homepage widget, like this particular screen that is visible to you right now, your home screen, is a stateful widget as of now, as it's defined inside the code. Why is it a stateful widget? Because we have a state to maintain over here, this particular counter. So this makes it like in order to maintain this state, in order to reload the application, like rebuild the application or rebuild the widget once it gets updated, we need to define it as a stateful widget. So for this reason, this is a stateful widget. Now this stateful widget has a property called title, and now the since it's a stateful widget, it is going to have a create state function. All right, and this create state function is going to create the state. What is the state? Like I mentioned before as well, uh, your Flutter, like the widget, the stateful widget is going to rebuild itself once it changes. It changes, right? So this create state function is responsible for rebuilding the widget every time the state changes. And the state is being maintained over here. There's a counter, and then we have a function called increment counter, which is basic. What it's basically doing is uh, every time you like this function is called, the counter gets incremented by 1 and the state is set. The set state function is going to basically set this new state, the like whatever update you have made to the state, the particular variable, it is going to be updated inside your code, inside the Flutter state. All right. The next thing is again the build function, as we saw earlier. And this build function, we'll come back to scaffold, app bar, and stuff like this later on. Let's first make sure that you've understood the things I've said so far. If there are any doubts, please like shoot them inside the comment section, and I'll take a look at it later on in a bit. All right, let's see a cool thing. Right now, when you click on the plus button, it is incrementing this counter, right? What if we set it this plus plus to minus minus? Let's reload our code once again. And now when I'm clicking on it, the counter gets decremented by 1. Similarly, I can do a plus equal to 2, and this is going to increment the counter by 2 every time. So you can just play around with the code and see if it's breaking or it's working, and if it's working, how it's working. That's how you learn programming. Uh, then this build function is returning a scaffold. Now, what is a scaffold? Okay, there are a few, like if you create a basic Flutter application, you'll get all these comments, and these help you understand things very well. Just give me a second. Just give me a second. Yeah, I'll screen share once again. Sorry for the disturbance. I hope my screen is visible. All right, so we have a scaffold over here, and what the scaffold basically does is it provides you the app screen, the basic app screen, and then the app screen can have various components like the app bar or maybe the footer, and then the body of your screen, things like this. So scaffold is basically your screen component. All right. Now the scaffold has a lot of properties. App bar body, like I mentioned earlier as well. Floating action button, floating action button location. Then there's drawer and bottom navigation bar, bottom sheet, background color, a lot of things. All right. And you can just play around with these properties. If you want to dive deeper into what all these properties are for, you can go to the Flutter documentation that will be shared with you in a minute. I think we can share the Flutter documentation. So whatever things that I'm explaining right now, if you find any discrepancies, or if you have if you have few doubts regarding all the stuff that I'm explaining right now, just go to the Flutter documentation. Just search up whatever like widget that you're having problem with, or whatever properties that you're having problem with, and just go through a documentation and you'll understand it from there. Or you can Google as well, which is the easiest way to go about it. So yeah, the first thing, we see a app bar, and this app bar, um, all right. So this app bar widget is basically this app bar that you see over here. You can change the title. Now, I mentioned it before as well, right? Changing this particular title is changing the title in that app bar. So how is it? How is it happening? So if you see over here, this while like creating the my homepage object, We are providing the property title to it, and the value for that is caffeine. And this is how the widget got constructed. And then in the state, we are accessing this particular property by widget.title. So if we remove this, we can have our own title as well, which can be any text that you want. So for now, I'll just keep it. This is a Flutter tutorial. All right, let's just reload the application, and there we go. The title has been changed. There are other properties to this as well. You can set the background color for this, and background color can be, let's just keep it colors dot black for now. I'll change it obviously, but this was just to give you guys an example. So you can mess around with a lot of properties. You can change the font for text as well. If you hover over text, you'll see that it has a few properties as well. So in order to like change the text style and stuff, you need to define the style property. Um, we'll go about this later on. For now, just keep it as widget.title. All right. Next thing, we have a center widget, and this is going to basically center everything that is its child widget. So another concept comes into play here: child widgets. What are child widgets? Like I said, Flutter maintains a widget tree, right? So there will be a parent widget. Then the parent widget is going to have a few child widgets. To make you better understand this, let's take a look at the scaffold widget. All right. Uh, so, okay, not the best example. We'll come back to this example later on. I'll give you a proper example where you'll be able to understand things more properly. But the basic gist of it is that Flutter maintains a widget tree. So there's going to be a parent tree, and that parent tree is going to have a child widget. Sorry, there's going to be a parent widget, and that parent widget is going to have child widgets. Or it can have children widgets as well. There's a difference between child and children. If there are certain widgets inside Flutter that can have only a single child. So in that case, you define the child property. For example, the center widget can have only a single child widget. That's why I define the child property. On the other hand, the column widget, there are a few like widgets that can have multiple children. For example, the column widget, the row widget, or maybe your stack widget. So these can have multiple children. In that case, we define the children property, and then we pass all the children widgets as a list of widgets. As you can see here, this is a list of widget, and we have a text widget over here, then this counter thing. Then there's a floating action button. Like we saw it earlier, it's a property of the scaffold widget. And this particular floating action button, since it's a button, it is going to have a like action associated with, right? And one of the actions associated with this floating action button is on press, which is basically determining what happens when we click this button. So when we are clicking this button, it runs the increment counter function that we saw earlier above, and is basically going to increment this counter by one, by two, since we changed the code earlier. So yeah, then it has a child widget of icons. It basically has an icon widget as the child widget, which is this particular plus icon. Okay, so this was the basic overview of the default Flutter code. Now let's do one thing. Let's create all this thing on our own. We won't be needing this scaffold and stuff, so we'll be removing this. And we are going to create our own basic Flutter application. It won't be a very good UI. It's just going to be a very basic application where you'll understand things, like different things that go inside a Flutter application. Um, we don't need this. We'll be needing this part, this material app. I'll change the title back to caffeine. Uh, let's define it as home screen. Just to show you guys, we don't have to name it that particular my home screen. Now we are going to define our home screen, and this will be a stateless widget. All right. In today's session, we won't be doing anything that involves changing of state, changing of properties or information over time. So this is going to be a stateless widget. To define stateless widgets, there are two ways. All right, you can write the code yourself, or you can use some of the shortcuts that come with Flutter, and I mean the Flutter extension inside VS Code, or maybe the Flutter extension inside Android Studio. So if you type STL on your keyboard, you'll get two options: the stateless widget and the stateful widget. Actually, if you write STF, you get the stateful widget option, but if you write STL, it'll give you the stateless widget option. Just press enter, and this basic code gets generated on its own. Now we are going to name this home screen. There's no title over here, so this can go. And this is going to be a scaffold, right? Now, one more thing. Uh, the phones that we use today, a lot of these phones have notches, right? For example, take iPhone. There's a pretty ugly big notch on top. So those notches can be a kind of a hindrance when it comes to your application. For example, let's say there's a big notch over here, but at the same time, the code that you wrote, the application that you wrote had some kind of, let's say, logo or a button in this location. So if you just run this code normally on the iPhone, what will happen is that notch is going to hide your particular button or the logo. To prevent that, what you can do is like cover your scaffold with a safe area widget. So safe area widget, what it does is it makes sure that the notches are covered properly. So whatever your application is, it runs below that notch and not interface with the notch. So we are, first of all, what we are going to do is we are going to return a safe area widget, and this safe area widget is going to have a child scaffold. Scaffold, like I told, is basically your screen. Cool. And we are getting a warning over here. We'll come back to this warning later on. You'll get a better understanding of what this warning is later on. Okay, cool. Now this scaffold, let's refresh this application once again. So you see, so far we have nothing in our application. Now the first thing that we are going to do is define the app bar property of scaffold, and we're going to use the built-in app bar widget for now. This is going to have a title. If you are not sure what all properties a widget provides, like I've explained before as well, just hover on top of that widget and you'll see all the properties that are provided in that widget. All right. So for the title property, which again you'll find inside this list somewhere. Okay. For this title property, we are going to use a text widget, obviously since it's text. So this is going to be caffeine, like we defined it earlier as well. And so just two lines of code and we have a app bar in our application. This is the beauty of Flutter. A lot of things that are frequently used by developers while creating mobile applications, these are predefined inside your this particular package that we saw earlier, this material.dart. So you don't have to define everything from scratch once again. Most of the things that are usually used are pre-built in Flutter. We created a app bar with just two lines of code. That's it. Now, the scaffold is going to, I mean, the screen is going to have a body, right? So we'll have to define the body property of this application. Now, think of it like this. This is our body, right? This is our application's body. Now, this is going to have some components. By components, what I mean is this is going to have some cards over here that will display all the coffees that our application is going to basically show. Cool. So uh, this is our body, and this is going to have a few cards over here. So the first thing that we see here is this is in a way similar to a column, right? There's a column, and that column has a few objects in it. So we are going to use the column widget. Now, like I mentioned before, a column widget can have multiple children in it. uh, and like there are certain widgets just like column widget, for example the row widget and stack widget, that can have multiple children. Widgets like safe area, they can have I mean safe area, they can have only a single child widget. So yeah, um, column widget, it can have, we first need to define the alignment of how the cards will be placed inside this column, right? So for alignment, there are two types of alignment when it comes to columns and rows. The first one is the main axis alignment. We'll define it later on. And the other one is cross axis alignment. Now, what do you mean by cross axis alignment and main axis alignment? When it comes to columns, columns are vertical, right? So the main axis inside your column is the vertical axis, and uh, the cross axis, that is the secondary axis, will be your horizontal axis inside this column widget. When it comes to row widget, rows are horizontal, right? So the main axis will be your horizontal axis, and the cross axis will be your vertical axis. So for this one, for the column, we have the vertical axis as our the main axis, and what we want is we want our cards to start appearing from the top. All right, this is how the cards are going to appear. The first card will appear here. When we add the next card, it should appear below this, then the other card, then the other card. So this is going to be main axis alignment dot start. Things will start appearing from the start. If we do it end, it will start stacking up from the bottom. Then there are other properties as well. Center, it will start appearing from the center, and it will space up accordingly. Then there's space around, space evenly, space between. You can like play around with these properties as you want. The best way to learn Flutter is just create random widgets and play around with these properties. Go to the documentation, read the documentation around this stuff. You can, if you don't want to go to that documentation, just hover over it and it'll tell you what, it'll give you the basic idea regarding the widget. And that's how you actually learn Flutter. Just play around with the widgets, and soon you'll get a better grip over everything. All right. So this is going to be start like we discussed earlier, and the cross axis alignment, we want it to be in the center. Like if you're talking horizontally, we want our cards to be in the center of the screen. So this will be cross axis alignment dot center. Cool. We have defined the alignment of our objects. Now comes the part where we'll be defining the children, the cards basically. So we're going to have the children property. This is going to return a list of widgets, and let's start defining the widgets. Now the next thing is container. Container widget, as the name suggests, it creates a box for you. As simple as that. So this container widget, now it can have a few properties. The first property is height. Now there are two ways to define heights and uh, like like the dimensional properties inside Flutter. So the one way is you just put in some values directly, put in some double values directly. For example, let's say I put in 30. So the height of this particular widget will be 30 pixels. Now, this is a wrong way of defining heights and stuff inside your application. Why is it a wrong way? Let's say one person has a tablet, an Android tablet. So the screen size is pretty big, right? You can define pretty big widgets. But if the screen, let's say some person is using a 4.5-inch screen, the screen size becomes very small. So if you have created an application for the tab, it won't scale well to the small screen mobile device. Things will start breaking. There will be some like overflow of pixels. What do I mean by overflow of pixels? I'll just show it with an example. Let's keep it at 3000 and you'll just 30,000 and you'll just see things breaking pretty soon. We'll define a width as well. Let's keep it at 300 for now. This is just an example. And in order to be able to see this, we'll define the color as black, just so it's visible right now. And we run the application. As you can see, it's very small. Let me zoom in. Yeah. So we defined the height as what, 30,000, right? And this 30,000 was a very huge value. It was bigger than the dimensions allowed by the screen. And so our application overloaded our particular widget, overflowed the screen by 29,642 pixels. You see the point that I'm trying to make here, right? We defined the component for a very huge screen size, and that's the reason why things broke. How do I fix this zoom in? Shit. All right. So now we need to fix this. Okay. What we are going to use is media query. What is media query? The media query widget allows you to uh, get the access few properties of the screen or the device that you are using. So when you are defining height and width in terms of the device's screen, what will happen is, let's say, take the example of the tablet and phone once again. So let's say you're writing the code for the tablet, and you define the width to be 50% of the screen's width in the tablet. Now this 50% of the screen's width will apply to the phone as well. So this like percentage wala concept jo hai, this will apply to the screen as well. And when this happens, your things will start scaling properly. The same code will scale to the mobile device as well. Now let's see how we can use the media query to access the width and height of the screen. So media query dot off context. What do you mean by context? Context is basically it tells Flutter where that particular widget is located inside the widget tree. So You can think of it as a unique identifier, a unique widget identifier. Just give me a second. Hmm. So we are going to access the size property, and in size we are specifically targeting the height property. Now we have the height of this container. If we refresh it, what you're going to see is it's still overflowing. It's overflowing due to a reason. See, um, yeah, this was equal to this container's height is equal to the height of the screen, right? But here, if you see in the height of the screen, this there's this app bar as well, which is roughly 56 pixels high. So this is the reason why this container still overflowed. But we don't want it to be this high, this container, right? This like this wide and high. So we wanted just to be around 0.25% of the entire height. So we'll just multiply it by 0.25, which is 25% of the screen size available. And now when we run it, the container becomes small. Let me run this application once again. It's going to take some time. Meanwhile, I'll write media query for, and we're going to set it around 80% of the entire width. So this will be 0.8. Cool. We can set a few more properties like padding to define the width of the container. I hope I'm audible right now. Just give me a second. There's sorry for the disturbance, guys. There was some issue with my microphone. I had to change my headphone. Let's continue with the session. I'll be sharing my screen once again. Before I start sharing, let me take a quick look at the comments and see if there are any doubts. Yeah, no doubt so far. Great. Alright, I'll start sharing my screen and we'll go through the code once again. Cool, let me know if it's visible. And let's keep it at 100 and see what happens. This is weird. Oh, perfect. I was setting padding instead of margin. So margin is the space outside and padding is the space inside. I'm gonna keep it at 10. 10 looks okay. Let's keep it at 20. Oh, for some reason this has stopped working. I'll define this property once again. Cool. Flutter can be buggy sometimes, especially when you're using a emulator like this one, the web emulator basically. Okay, cool. So this is how we created a container. A container can have decoration as well, decoration property. So this decoration property is going to take a box decoration widget, and here we have the border property. I hope it's the border property. I'm not sure about it. I'll keep it at 20 and check if it's fine. Let me just a quick cross reference. Okay, so it was border radius property. Cool. The things like these are bound to happen when you're writing Flutter code. You'll often forget what the particular widget was. So the best thing to do in this situation is you can just refer to some previous code that you have written, or you can just quickly Google it. So in my case, I was stuck in the decoration property, right? The border radius property. So I can just do a quick border radius Flutter, and docs come up, and there you have it, like all the constructors in order to define that property. So this will be border radius, and it is going to take a border radius or circular, and this will be 20. Let's see what happens to our widget now that we run it. See, it got a nice border around it. So this is how we go about it. You can change the color as well. For now, we have given it a color of black. Let's change the entire theme of this application. Cool. So first of all, we are going to change the title bar's color. Again, for this we'll be using the background color property, color, and we are going to define color this time in terms of hex codes. I'm going to give this a coffee theme. So a quick coffee color theme, and this is going to give me some color palettes. Let's just check this one out. So this will be our app bar's color. How do you define like colors in terms of hex codes? So it is 0x, and then this particular one, this FF, this is actually going to determine the opacity. All right, we can keep it somewhat low as well if we want to keep it a bit transparent, but I'm keeping it full, like the opacity is full. Then the actual hex code of the color. So now you'll see one thing, we are getting a lot of warnings around our code, right? What do these warnings say? Let's check. Um, yeah, prefer const with constant constructors. So just check one thing out. Here, this color widget is not going to change. This is constant, right? Its property, the color that we have set for it, is not going to change. It's fixed. So this is constant, right? So you can just keep it as constant since this is not changing. And it will be easy for the compiler to understand that this is a fixed property. And so it will be a more efficient operation for the compiler to compile this code. Similarly, if we go down, if we check here, this radius, I mean this margin is not going to change. It is fixed. It is 20 pixels. This is constant. So let's define it as constant. Now you see the warning is gone because since this was constant, that's why. Now an interesting thing, this particular thing is not going to be constant. It is going to vary with each screen. That's why we haven't set it as constant. If we try to set it as constant, I think it is going to give us an error. See, which gave us two errors. The class of media query doesn't have a constant constructor of. So this can't be a constant property, and hence we have to define it as non-constant. Um, yeah, so we're going to change this color as well. Color, and this will be 0x, again full opacity, and this color doesn't look that great, but just for the sake of it I'm going to keep it constant. So this will be const again, and let's take a look at our application once we hit refresh. As you can see, wait, it didn't change. This is weird, it should have changed. Alright, it changed, good. Let's change the application's background as well. Okay, so this will be done inside um, scaffold. There's a scaffold widget. This is our scaffold widget. Now if you see, this code is not formatted properly, right? So what you can do is, in order to format this code properly, in order to make it more readable, just do a Flutter format dot basically says that just format this particular file that I'm working on right now, or the particular directory that I'm working in right now. And now the code is formatted. The scaffold widget is more visible right now while reading the code. And here we are going to define the uh, background color property, and we'll keep the background color as this very light brown. This will be color 0x, and then FF, the code. Let's refresh, and we have this coffee theme to our application now. Cool. Now on to the next thing. Mm, we have let's just imagine this is one of our cards. Now we'll be needing several cards over here, right? So let's create some more cards. One thing that you can do is, all right, I'll just do it first and then I'll explain it to you, so you'll get a better gist of what I'm trying to say here. Let's just copy this container's code and I'm gonna paste it a few times, which is a bad practice. I'll tell you why in a bit. For some reason, I don't know why, but code is not updating. Running into this problem again and again. Let's just restart this once again. Um, Meanwhile, let's just keep working on the code by the time it starts. Now, as you can see, all these containers are, we have defined all these containers. These containers are basically our cards. But if you see here, this code is very repetitive, right? We are doing the same thing again and again. So why don't we just define a completely different widget for this particular purpose? And we can then use the widget instead of writing the code for the entire widget again and again. It will be more efficient, right? So let's see how we do this in a bit once the code starts. And yeah, so as you can see, there's a pixel overflow, right? We'll come back to this in a bit. First, we have more important things to attend to, and explain how we can remove this code, this pixel overflow. So we have defined in total 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's define one more container. 5 containers in total, but here you can only see 3. Where are the rest? You can't access the rest, right? You need to be able to scroll in order to see the other cards. So how do you do that? For that, what you need to do is you need to make your screen scrollable. Not the entire screen, this particular part of the screen scrollable where these cards are. So how do you do that? In order to make a certain part of your screen scrollable, you need to wrap this thing inside a scrollable widget. Now, uh, our column, I mean this particular section is the one where you want your screen to be scrollable, right? So you want this, you want to wrap this inside, just give me a second, single child, single child scroll view, yeah. So to wrap this inside a single child scroll view widget, and now what direction can you scroll in? Like horizontal direction or the vertical direction, you need to define that what direction you want your application to be scrollable in. So we'll define the uh, scroll direction as axis dot vertical. So now your application, your particular column is scrollable in the vertical direction. You can access the other cards as well. Pretty interesting, right? uh, like I said before, the things that are used more frequently inside Flutter, these are predefined. All right, so the developers have made the widgets in such a way that the things that are used more frequently, these are predefined inside Flutter, so you don't have to write the code from scratch for all of these components. You can just use the predefined components, maybe tweak them a bit in accordance with your needs and requirements, and yeah, just tweak them a bit and things will be done. So now we have a scrollable screen. We have an app bar, and uh, there are a few cards, but the code is repetitive. So we don't need this repetitiveness inside. So what we are going to do this, let's copy this. We're going to create another widget over here, a stateless widget. Since, like I said, in this particular section, we are just using stateless widgets. There's no state to be maintained. In the future sessions, in tomorrow's sessions, these cards will have dynamic data inside them, so these will be converted into stateful widgets. But for now, just let's just go with stateless widgets. So the stateless widget is going to have the name of I'm gonna name it coffee card. All right, and we copied the container code from top, right? So let's just paste it over here. Cool. And now see the magic of it. This is our initial code. Okay, very repetitive, very ugly. Now what I'm gonna do is we have defined a widget for this, a stateless widget for this, right? Let's just remove all of this repetitiveness, this clutter, and we are just going to use a coffee card widget. We had 5 of these earlier, so 5 of these now. And just like that, the same functionality, but our code looks much cleaner than before. So this is how you work in like object-oriented programming and like programming best practices basically. So this particular programming best practice is called DRY. Don't repeat yourself. If there's a piece of code that is repeating within your code, just make it into a function or a class or anything. Just write it in a way that it can be reused. Here our the card widget was being repeating inside the code, so we created another widget for it, a stateless widget that can be simply used. No more clutter inside our code. um, we're running out of time, so I'll have to pace up a bit now. Instead of another interesting thing about it, so instead of now maintaining all of these cards separately, we can just change the code of this particular widget and it'll reflect in all the other cards. Pretty interesting. Okay, we start defining the content inside the cards. There's going to be one image and just the name of the coffee. We'll keep this today's session very simple. So the image and then the title. So since this is going to be like once again vertical, the image will come on top and the title will come like this below it vertically. So this is going to be a what do I say, a column widget. So as the child, we are going to use a column widget, and this column widget is going to have children. The first children is going to be a image widget. uh, Now we need to define okay, we're going to use a network image for now. There are two kinds of images, all right. One is actually more than two, but for now I'm just referring to two. One is network image and the other one is asset image. So asset image is basically the images that are present within your code base, that you have downloaded locally or that are present locally in your code base, and these will be picked from your local files. Network image is basically an image that exists on the internet. You'll be needing the URL for that particular image, and then you can load that image on your uh, in your application. So this is going to be a network image, and there are certain properties associated with it. Just hover over it; it'll give you the example of it. So there's width, there's height, there's color, opacity, color blend mode, fit, and stuff like that. For now, we need a coffee like coffee images, right? So this will have the images of I mean a catalog of all the different types of coffees available. So Let's take a quick uh, example. First one will be Robusta. Coffee image. Cool. Alright, so we want this image, right? Just copy the image address. We're going to provide this to this widget. And one problem with this particular thing is that URLs can be pretty big. Then we are going to provide a width and height for now. Showing some errors. Let's define the width and height first. This will be, let's keep it at 100 for now. Again, best practice would have been using media query, but just for the sake of simplicity, I'm keeping it 100. Then there's going to be height as well, and I'm going to keep it, let's say 100 once again. We'll change this later on. And then the URL, let's format this code so it looks better. Yeah, looks better now. And let's refresh. It's not refreshing once again, which is very frustrating. Okay, sweet. The image appeared. Now if you see, it's stuck to the top, right? We don't want that. Let's keep a spacing on the top. So when you want to include spacing inside any widget, the easiest way to do that is using sized box. We'll define a height for it as 10. Again, media query is the best way to go, but I'm keeping it simple. Quick refresh, and as you can see, there's a space now on the top, which is equal to 10 pixels. Then finally, we will be having a text widget over here that is going to have the name of the coffee. Robusta for now, but we'll come back to this later on. We'll make these cards a little bit dynamic in terms of the data that they are being generated with. I'll explain what I'm trying to speak in a bit. As you can see, right now, this all these cards have the same information, the same image, the same text, right? Let's give it some style properties. This is the text style property that I was talking about earlier. So it takes the text style widget, text style widget, and here we can define the properties. So the first one will be the font size. Let's keep it at what, uh, 30. I'm not sure. And let's keep the color as white for now. Again, this session wasn't about QA. This was to give you a basic example of Flutter, a basic gist of how things work in Flutter. So don't pay a lot of attention to the UI. I'm not very good at UI, but I can make you explain things properly. So yeah, it's pretty frustrating when Flutter doesn't work properly. Cool. Let's just keep a spacing between this text and image as well. So again, a size box. We can just copy the code from top. Size box, and we'll keep the height 20. Let's change it up top as well. 20, and a bit better from earlier. Since this is a column, let's change the main axis alignment properties and the cross axis alignment properties. Let's keep it center, and I guess cross axis alignment is fine, but again we'll keep it at center. Little better looking than earlier. But yeah, the UI can be better. This was just to give you a basic example of things. A lot of warnings here right now, um, because again we could have kept things constant, a lot of things constant. Let's see what these warnings are for. Constant, right? So let's define it as constant, since all the properties are constant anyways. Okay, this won't be constant. All the warnings are gone. There are a few over here. This is weird. Okay, fixed. Now the next thing that we are going to do, and the final thing in today's session, is that let's just make these cards in a way that we can change the image and the title as we are calling the as we are like creating the card objects over here, right? What we want to do is basically define the image and the title property in these cards. So let's come back to this code. We have a final, we discussed final yesterday. It is for defining constant properties of a class. So final string image URL, and we have a final string uh, card title. Alright, these two properties are going to be there, and we need to define them here as well. This dot image URL. The default one will be, let's keep it as none. Since this is a string, that's why I'm using none. It's giving me an error. Okay, yeah. We haven't, see, one thing is, this is not nullable, right? If we wanted it to be nullable, we would have used these question marks, and then things would have been okay. Like it would have been okay if these properties would have been uh, null. But right now these aren't nullable, so we need to define these within the constructor. So this card title, it's again going to be none. Let's not keep it none. Let's keep it robusta. So if the card title is not provided, it's going to be robusta. Um, I'll format the code once again. Then the final thing over here, you can now define the image URL and the card title properties. So the card title, let's keep the first one as, okay, since this is going to be text widget, text. Okay, no, this is going to be a string, right? So let's keep the first one as Arabica. Then I'm going to copy this, remove the ones below, Robusta. Then there's Liberica, and there was some more. I can't remember the name. Excelsior or something like that. I don't exactly remember the name, so I'm gonna call it Excelsior. Whatever. Who cares? Now let's get the images for these. Arabic coffee image. Copy image address. They're going to provide these image addresses over here. This was for Arabic, right? So, oh shit. This is going to be a string once again. So, this. Then, I'm sorry, there's some disturbance on my end. Can't control it. Robusta, we already have for Robusta, but again, let's search it. It's easier. Copy image address, paste it here, and Liberica. Oh, it's called Liberica. Yeah, it's Liberica. Um, Only more squarish, but I'll take this one. Copy image address. Once again, paste it over here. I need to make one small change before we move on to the final step. I'll tell you what that is. It's Excel, so cool. Copy image address. I pasted it here. I'll fix the name, but before that, let's format the code once again so it's more readable. Um, Excel. So one final change that is required is we need to change this particular string. Alright, we want it to be uh, the image URL that we are providing up top. So this will be image URL, and again the text. This is now dynamic, like at the time at least the card is being created. So this will be card title. It's giving me an error. Weird. Evaluation of this constant expression throws an exception. Why is it throwing an exception? Card title. Okay. 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 This fixed. Since like this particular property was changing, it can't be constant. Like if it would have been constant, cool. I think we have done everything. So just reload our application once again, and I hope, yeah, everything is as we want it to be. The cards were generated dynamically. The images were like, we provided a different image, a different card title to each card, but at the same time the code was, as you can see, uh, reusable, right? We didn't write the same code again and again for each of these cards. We just wrote a reusable card widget, and then we provided it some properties, some values, and these cards were generated. Um, just give me a second. So sorry for the small hiccup, and somehow my internet got disconnected, which is now quite a regular occurrence. So yeah, uh, let's get back at the session without wasting any more time. We are mostly done with today's code. I'll just give you a quick walkthrough of what we have done so far once again. Uh, so the last thing that we did in our code was we made our cards reusable, right? We defined all these properties of our cards that we can set at the time of construct the card object, the image or in the card type. So now each time you're creating a card, all you need to do is just define a URL for the image and the name of the like the title of the card, and this card will be generated for you. This is not looking very great, but it this particular application was just to give you a rough idea of how things work in Flutter, of what stateless widgets are, what stateful widgets are, and then what widgets are, to be more precise, what material is, what Casper is. Then we learn about what save area is. Uh, we learned about the size widget and stuff like this. So these are some of the very basic widgets that we use inside Flutter. As you like work more extensively in Flutter, you come across a lot more widgets as well. You can read about all these widgets, all these various widgets that Flutter provides you uh, in the Flutter documentation. Also, there is a very interesting YouTube channel. Uh, this is official, not a YouTube channel, it's official series by Flutter. Is called Widget of the Week. Take a quick look at it. We're done with the application, so I'll just tell you guys some of the resources that you can use for getting better at Flutter. So this is the particular thing that I'm talking about. I'm going to open it in my incognito tab. For obvious reasons, I don't want you guys to see my YouTube recommendations. Uh, this is all the popular and very frequently used widgets that are often used inside Flutter.
So you can go through all these videos. These are very interesting videos. They have great animation, and all these widgets, how they are used, why they are used, it's explained really well inside these videos. And I'm pretty sure by the time you're done watching all these videos, you'll know Flutter to an extent that you have never known before. You'll be able to create pretty beautiful, pretty responsive, and like good applications using Flutter. So this is a great playlist, and no matter what your proficiency in Flutter is, whether you're a beginner or experienced Flutter developer, I'll recommend this playlist to everyone. Uh, the link for it will be shared with you guys in a bit. If possible, the team can share this link. Flutter Widget of the Week is the name of this particular playlist. Yeah. Just go through all these videos, go through the Flutter documentation. Let's just take a quick look of the Flutter documentation as well. Um, Clicked on the wrong link. Just Yeah, this is the Flutter documentation, and here, as you can see, there's API docs, then some videos. This is your home for all things Flutter. If you want to learn Flutter, just come to this documentation website. This is the video catalog. If you want to learn via video lectures and things like this, these are proper video catalogs where you can learn Flutter. Then there's API documentations, widget catalogs. This widget catalog was the one I was talking about earlier. Here you'll find all the possible widgets inside Flutter. Everything is here. All you need to do is come to this widget catalog. Just maybe, let's say you want to work with assets and images and icons. So just open this section. You see the image widget over here, right? If you go to this, first of all, there's this video explaining what image widget does. And then there are some examples, some code examples, and then there are image properties, constructors as well. Everything associated with the image widget, how you can use images inside your Flutter application. It is here in this documentation. Just come to this documentation, read everything. If you're stuck somewhere while working inside your Flutter application, the code, you can come here. This is a great place to learn Flutter. This is where you actually learn Flutter. So yeah, these were two of the most important resources I wanted to talk about. First one is the Flutter documentation. There's no better resource than Flutter documentation to learn Flutter. And then the second thing was this Flutter of widget of the week playlist. So yeah, we created our first very basic application using Flutter. This was an introductory session for you guys. In the next session, what we are going to do is we are going to build an actual application where you can see a catalog of all the uh, coffees available to you. And for that, we'll be using Firebase. Just for the sake of it, I'm also going to include Flutter authentication in it, basically the Google authentication, sign in with Google, so you guys can understand how that stuff works as well. So next session is going to be on Firebase, uh, everything involving Firebase and Fire Flutter. Fire Flutter is basically the combination of Firebase and Flutter. So yeah, next session is going to be the most important session we have had so far, and that will be extensive Flutter stuff. So I'll suggest for the next session, at least you guys go through all the stuff that I've explained so far. Go through the Flutter documentation, just dabble around in it a bit. Over the weekend, you can also like go through the Dart concepts that I talked about earlier. The resources for all these will be shared with you guys shortly, and go through these concepts. And then in the next session we are going to do some more hands-on coding. So I'll suggest that please come with at least your Flutter installed properly on your system, so that you can, if you want, you guys can code along with me. So yeah, that was it for today's session. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll stop sharing my screen now and quickly take a look if there are any doubts here. All right, no doubts as such. Uh, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correct. If I'm not, I'm sorry. Advait. So hey, I'm happy that this session is helping you, and I hope you learned something by the end of this entire Flutter Festival series. And it's great teaching you guys. It's great working with Flutter once again with you guys. I'm primarily a Python developer, a backend developer in Python, and Flutter is something I do just for hobby, for working in hackathons and stuff. So revisiting Flutter because of you guys is pretty great. I'm enjoying it so far, and yeah, I hope you guys got to learn something from today's session. So we'll be ending this session now. If you have any doubts, then go ahead and ask your doubts on the Discord server. You can take a quick screenshot of today's session and post it on your Twitter. You can tag me and DSC on Twitter, and you can post your learnings on maybe LinkedIn. Tag me there as well. Tag DSC, and just have fun with it. Just play around with Flutter, and maybe you'll build the next great app, next great Indian or international app. So yeah, it was a great session with you guys. We'll be ending the today's session, and have a great day. Bye.